Well, hello and welcome. Let me do that one more time. Hello, and welcome to 2023, the Friday Reporter. First guest is, I'm just super lucky to catch up with this friend. So thank you for joining me in a conversation with my friend who about 30 years ago, I tried to convince to join my sorority in college. This is how long Jeanette and I have been friends. Jeanette Hoffman is the president of Marathon Public Affairs, but that doesn't even scratch the surface. Thank you, my friend, for being with me.
I am so excited to be on your podcast, Lisa. I'm such a fan, and we go back so far. I can't believe you said 30 years. Now people know how old we are.
No. I mean, we were infants back then, right?
Right.
Let's tell
we
no
were
one.
prodigies. We were going to college at like 10.
Right. But Jeanette, you and I, we have such it's amazing to me how we became friends in college. And then both were like just two young females in an all-male town in Trenton, working in politics, working in government, doing all of these things that we have done now to really sort of get us to where we are today. Our careers are quite similar. I'm here in DC, you're in New Jersey, but you are like a super sought after spokesperson and just sort of you do so much on air too, in addition to giving great counsel to your clients. Talk to me a little bit about, for those who don't know your background, walk me through a little bit of your background and how you got started.
Sure. Well, our backgrounds, as you said, are eerily similar, right? We both went to the College of New Jersey, which was Trenton State at one point in time when we both started and then switched over to TCNJ. And I got my background interning for Governor Whitman. I think you also you worked in the Whitman administration too. And it was just super fun interning there. And it was very different at that time. As you said, it was not a lot of women were there. Governor Whitman was such a great role model, being the first woman governor and still the only woman governor, right, and a Republican. So it was just fantastic working in that administration. But I just loved politics and I loved being around it. The second I started as, a 21-year-old, God, we were so young. But it was just fantastic. You just got to they let you do everything. And we were just so fortunate and so lucky to be able to tackle all those issues and just be a sponge and absorb everything and learn everything. And immediately I was a communications major. I started a minor in political science. I didn't finish it because I wanted to graduate in 4 years, go figure. And I loved political communications specifically because I just loved how you can take these complex issues and just boil them down to quick sound bites and really just, boil things down for everyday people to understand really complicated issues. Worked in the Whitman State House in constituent relations, where a lot of people got their start. Jon Stewart worked in constituent relations, the comedian, in that OCR office, not for the Whitman administration. Yeah. I forget who he worked for. Maybe it was Florio. I don't know. It wasn't Whitman, but anyway. So that was just a really cool place to be. We worked with really fun people. And then I worked in the Assembly Republican office, and I worked on a campaign for the 14th Republican candidates. And I think you worked also that same year.
I was in 11.
County in 11. Yeah. And then I worked for the Republican State Committee, where you also were. So I think we were like pretty much on parallel tracks.
It's amazing.
There.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think though, the one thing, Jeanette, that I always often sort of boast and brag about is the fact that, the state, people forget that there is no really sort of dedicated media market. So we have to punch above our weight every day. So as we're trying to break through with these news stories, we're trying really to sort of cross the barrier into New York and Philadelphia, right? I mean, there's just, that's really the biggest piece, right? So those are the markets that actually cover New Jersey, except that there's this really robust inside the state set of news outlets, right? So some of them are now, of course, they're all owned by Gannett or, some other sort of monopoly, if you will, but there are also a lot of these locals, these weeklies, these other tremendous publications that make it really interesting. You do a ton of TV. You're doing a lot of broadcasts. I still see you do so much. Tell me a little bit about, the marketplace has changed since I was there. Tell me a little bit about the kind of broadcast work that you do today.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, it was very different. The State House had a dedicated New Jersey bureau with the New York Times. Like New York Times reporters would sit in the State House, right? They don't have that anymore. That's like totally gone. Digital is really rising in New Jersey. There's, all these new digital outlets that there weren't there 20 years ago. And I do a lot of broadcast TV in New Jersey. My Nine is a New Jersey affiliate. I'm on a weekly TV show called New Jersey Now. It's one of the only public affairs TV shows besides New Jersey Spotlight that exists in New Jersey. So that's super fun. I mean, I get to talk about public affairs issues in New Jersey, which, a lot of, because like you said, it's New York and Philly, they barely touch on it, unless there's like a really big story about Governor Murphy. They don't cover the day-to-day activities about the New Jersey legislature. I mean, we do it on Channel 9. That's about it. But it's like super important to know what's going on in your state. So I feel fortunate that I get to talk about that on a weekly basis. But like you said, the media market has changed so much. I mean, Gannett controls like 10 daily newspapers in New Jersey.
And just had major cuts, and there's just more to come. And like, I feel like I worry. Well, that's not true. I had Steve Kornacki on the show a couple months back, who you and I know from a long time ago. I mean, we knew him before he was, the man, which he is, of course, now super well known across the country as sort of being this tremendous analyst of political data. But we knew him when he was on, I mean, we had to use dial-up internet to get to Politics NJ, right? And I had David Wildstein on the show, who has, he was the brainchild. He was the one who brought that all to us. So New Jersey, like, because we don't have a market, we also sort of figure out how to be telling our story. We had to be, reinventing ourselves every single few years. Long before people were going to Politico, they were going to Politics NJ. They were dialing up to get their political gossip and news. So I would imagine that where you are doing that broadcast now for 9 is just another way to give people access to what they need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I joke, I'm like, who's actually watching this show? But I was talking to a colleague from a business organization the other day, and he was like, thank you so much for talking about our survey to our members, because, you're like the only one, who understands it and it can really communicate it well. And, people do watch it. And I was, talking about, I think, the Cade Malinowski race one day in the summer, and NRCC actually retweeted a clip of me talking about it. So people actually do watch it. And, funny enough, Tom Kaine's campaign used a clip of me in their commercial this past campaign cycle. So it was hilarious because
we all grew up together.
I'm on network TV in Tom Kaine's commercial. People were like, "Do you know you're in Tom Kaine's commercial?" It was like a 5-second clip, but
so fun.
People do watch it, and it does matter because it is one of the only public affairs shows on in New Jersey. And going back to what you said about David Wildstein and Politics NJ, he is doing a phenomenal job with New Jersey Globe. And I know you read it, but nobody else is reporting on the insides and outs of campaigns in New Jersey from the local level up to the congressional level. And he's holding online debates with candidates that nobody else is doing. So he is reinventing media as we speak. It's
going to continue to grow too, because people need to know. And what's so funny, I have to tell you this funny story. I mean, a lifetime ago. I don't even think I had a second kiddo at the time. So this is like, I mean, my kids are driving cars now. So this is like way past, a long time ago. I had a meeting with the Republican leader of the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell, for some order of business. And he asked, what part of the U.S. I was from. And I told him New Jersey. And he said that was unfortunate. And I said, well, now wait a minute. What do you mean by that? And he really sort of, because, he really looks through everything through a political lens. He said to me, New Jersey is one of those states that every year we have a Senate race there that as we get closer and closer to election day, it looks really close. I mean, really close, to the point where we actually make some commitment, monetary commitment to see it through. And the polls show us that things are really moving in our direction. He said, but there's a story in Greek mythology. And he said, I can't even remember what the name of the goddess is, but she's this beautiful woman and boats are drawn to the island. And just as they get to the shore, the boat crashes. He says, New Jersey is that island. And I thought, isn't that so funny? But because of that, that to me is sort of, I point that out only because nobody can really figure it out. right? I mean, it's definitely a bellwether.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was so wrapped up in what happened this year, but the truth is that was like, you're gearing up for a big year next year. Next year is the
Yeah.
year for New Jersey. Nobody in New Jersey is like holding their breath about what's going to happen on the national side, on the federal side,
Federal level.
because the
Yeah.
real fight where real stuff happens is coming up. And New Jersey always has an election. So like you're just gearing, you're not even in your busy cycle yet. It's coming, right?
Yeah, 2023. I mean, people are really excited about it for a couple of reasons. In 2021, I mean, no one predicted Murphy to almost lose. But he almost did. Jack Ciattarelli came pretty darn close of beating him, the Republican.
Mhm.
And the legislature, they picked up 7 seats, 6 in the Assembly and 1 in the Senate. And the Senate president, Steve Sweeney, who's a Democrat, like super popular, was going to run for governor. He lost, and no one saw that coming.
To a truck
So,
driver who invested like $1.50 in the whole campaign.
yeah, he like barely campaigned. He had like a Facebook page and like a website for $12 or something like that, right?
But what are you thinking?
So,
What does that mean for 2023? Like what's coming up? Give us a preview of what you're looking at.
well, we just had a redistricting process in New Jersey, and Republicans really feel good about it. Usually we don't. I mean, we can't. Usually the Democrats get the best of us in redistricting, and they certainly did that in the congressional redistricting process. But the legislative redistricting process looks pretty good. So, we're thinking we could either, take control of the legislature or at least keep it pretty close to the fact where Democrats are going to have to fight over every close vote. So, they picked up a lot of seats in South Jersey, and we think, we have a really good shot this year. So we'll see, but I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Yeah.
And it always seems to be that whatever happens on the federal level tends to sort of swing back in New Jersey, but we didn't really see that big wave that we were expecting here on the national level. We didn't see any of that. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that means and how that plays out in New Jersey this year, because really that's sort of an indicator, I think, for the presidential as we go into 24.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I'm excited about Tom Kean going to Congress. I really think that was such a huge win. I mean, he's going to be, we're all friends with him, Lisa. I think he's just going to be such a great member. I mean, he just represents that district so well. He has in the Assembly and the Senate. He's such a great public servant, and he's such a great guy. I just think he's going to be so fantastic.
Well, I mean, we've obviously known him since he was the son of the great governor, right? And so like we've watched him sort of meteorically rise and do what he's going to do. So that'll be fun to watch. So when you are, I mean, New Jersey's so chock full of great stories, Jeanette, it's hard for me to even ask you to pick one or two that you've like especially enjoyed sort of having to speak up about. But is there something you can think about that you talked about on the public affairs show? Is there something that sort of really sort of stands out as one of your favorite or funniest moments?
Well, the craziest story of the past year has to be this whole murder for hire story of Sean Cattle, who is this Democratic operative in New Jersey that everybody knew. He was in Union County. He worked for State Senator Ray Lesniak. He was even on, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez's campaign as a GOTV guy. He was arrested for hiring a hitman to kill another political operative, right? And he's still awaiting trial. He's sitting in his home on house arrest. Like, he's not even in prison. And people, it's like a combination of The Sopranos and House of Cards. So like only in New Jersey does this stuff happen, right? And nobody can figure out, like, they think he's cooperating with the feds. Nobody can figure out like who he's going to flip on or what's going on. Now, Tony Teixeira, who was very also connected to him, and he was the Senate President Nick Scutari, another Democrat. He was his chief of staff. He was just arrested on tax evasion, and they think Sean Cattle somehow connected and flipped on him. Wow. So it's like where the cards are going to fall, like where this all leads to, nobody knows. But it's just like one of those only in New Jersey stories that like you're like, what the heck? Nobody saw it coming. It's just totally crazy. And we think it's going to play out even further because his sentencing has been postponed like 3 times now. So nobody knows like what it's going to lead to or where all the cards are going to fall.
More shoes to drop, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's
totally
amazing.
crazy.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it's I don't know that it's only in New Jersey, but like we really do a pretty spectacular job of having fantastic stories every year. And it's always one better than the next, right? I mean, you and I were around long enough to have, I mean, well, we could go on for days. We won't do that here, but there's so many names and so many characters, and the show is just so good. It's too good not to watch, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you wrote a made-for-TV movie about it, you wouldn't believe it, right? It's just too fantastic. It's too out of this world.
Totally
And then, of
agree.
course, our U.S. Senator Bob Menendez is once again under federal investigation, but that just seems to continue decade after decade.
Yeah, that seems to be a perennial story that comes back around again and again. And his son's now in the Congress too, so that'll make for interesting. I had to clarify that the other day. They said, "Well, I think he's a member of the Senate." I said, "Well, I think he's a junior, so he's the son, right?"
The son,
like
yes,
one of those things.
yes.
All right. So when you're not broadcasting and talking about public affairs in New Jersey and getting yourself featured in advertisements for members who are running for office, with 4 kiddos at a very, very wide range of ages and running marathon public affairs, because you are a marathon runner. How many are you up to now, girl?
I'm up to 4, and then like about a dozen half marathons.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
But you're a marathoner too.
Yeah, but it's been like almost 20 years. So I feel like maybe I should, I've hung up my shoes,
Listen,
girl.
you do it once a marathoner, always
once a marathoner, always a marathoner. But I like my knees, so I'm going to keep them for a little while longer. What else keeps you busy though? Like, what do you, I mean, you obviously have so many things to read before you go on the show, before you have to walk into a client's office. Like, with as many counties and as many legislators, what is your like must read in the morning? Like when you get up, like what do you have to read before you get started with your day?
Well, I'll say Politico Playbook by Matt Friedman really is like my cheat sheet, because he keeps it simple, right? He aggregates everything, all the stories. He's got a nice Jersey snark to it, right? Like the great headlines are funny. So I go to that. Then I go to New Jersey Globe. As I said, David Wildstein does a great job of keeping everything like hyper local. The Tap Intos are great local sites too. I don't know, those are super fun and local. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all, the regular must reads. That keeps me busy. My kids keep me super busy. And I know you have 2 driving. I have 2 driving. I also have 2 in preschool. So that keeps it, it's really a fun mix.
Tell me though, okay, so you'll kill me if I wasn't supposed to ask this question, but it's a great question and I have to ask, because you are not only a Republican powerhouse spokesperson, you're also married to a Democratic operative yourself, which must continue to bring like a lot of joy and hilarity to the house every day. Is that true? I mean, are you guys constantly debating? Tell me.
The kitchen table conversations are fun. I will tell you that. So there's a lot of times that we do agree, particularly like when like the far right goes crazy, like I can't get on board with that. Right. But, he's, I would say he's more progressive than I am, like to the right. Like I'm a pretty moderate Republican, but he's like pretty far to the left. Like I can't get behind some of that stuff. So there will be times when like, we're just going to have to like agree to disagree and just leave it there, because it's not getting anywhere. Yeah. We're not getting anywhere. We're not getting to a consensus at all.
Right.
And as some of our client issues, we completely we could never join our firms together because we would just be conflicted out all the time.
Yeah.
So course. He has his firm, I have my firm, and then that's that.
But I think that's so true of the Northeast. Like, I feel like that's kind of where I come back to always. Like I make jokes about how I'm a Republican from New Jersey, and then people sort of challenge whether or not that makes me a Republican anywhere else in the world. But I also think too, pragmatically speaking, like in public affairs, we're in the friend making business, right? I mean, for the most part, we're trying to find a way to, cut through see the political lines and where they are, but also be able to cut through that and identify ways to be smart and thoughtful, especially in a marketplace that isn't necessarily always going to take your story that you're selling for your clients. So it's great that you guys also have that sort of public affairs point of view, because I think that you can bounce ideas off one another.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like I get that some media in New Jersey may lean left, right? But like, I just think when you're coming at something and you're pitching someone's opinion, like an op-ed, I don't understand why some media won't take it. Like this is, you're just sharing an opinion of someone. So, it can be challenging to find, outlets that are even accepting of others' opinions. So, New Jersey is challenging that way. I feel like 20 years ago, it was more center than
Yeah.
it is moving a little
I
bit
think it
further
also
west.
was easier too, though, Jeanette. Don't you think? Like, I feel like the world has really changed in in like the op-ed game and the pitch game in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely has changed a lot. The digital era has definitely helped things.
Mm-hmm.
You're not completely waiting on print editors to run things like 10 days from now.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good
so,
point.
that does definitely open up a whole new world. And
Mm-hmm.
social, I think social is definitely a benefit. It definitely has its drawbacks too, social media.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I can see the pluses and the minuses, and I'm glad that it didn't exist when you and I were in college. That's for sure.
Oh my gosh, I feel for our children. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Well, either that or it'll make them really good at PR. What, I would hope, goodness. Um, what are you like? Are there any cool tactics? So many of the tactics that we use today are similar to the past, but have you had a campaign and by, I mean like issue campaign or issue that you're working on for clients? Have you had any recent success that you think was like maybe a new trend that you're going to look at for future clients?
Hmm. That's interesting. Social has been more important, I think,
Mhm.
than it has
Which platform do you typically are you drawn to?
Twitter.
Yeah,
For
still.
public affairs campaigns, definitely Twitter.
Yeah.
I've had one client really want more voices on Facebook,
Interesting.
more of a grassroots, because it has more of a grassroots feel.
Sure.
Um, but when targeting elected officials, it's just easier on Twitter.
Definitely still Twitter. Although,
Yeah.
I feel like every day I go to check, I'm worried about whether or not it's still going to be there. So maybe it's going to force us to, with the whole new ownership and
Elon's doing
everything
some
else.
interesting things.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's interesting. Social still, and because social is really where people are, right? You're supposed to meet your
Right.
audiences where they're congregating, and people are still very much on social. That's where they're getting their
That's where they get their
information.
news. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's the danger for journalism, is that most people are getting their news from social. And that's
Yeah.
why, places like Gannett, their sales are declining and they're laying off journalists. And it's because everyone is gravitating towards social media sources for their news.
And what's so interesting too, I had heard not that long ago. I'm reading and just finishing up Chris Steyerwalt's second book, where he talks about sort of like media consolidation and how as news outlets get bought by more and more of these conglomerates, the the shrinking of the local news is so much so that people are being more drawn to national news, which is why we're feeling sort of this agitation at a national level, whereas before we might have been hearing more agitation at a very, very local level about like, whatever it is that we need to care about.
That's interesting. Although, I don't know, have you gone on your Facebook neighbor group lately? There's a lot of agitation
I
there.
have to quiet those down, Jeanette, because those really do agitate me a little bit more than they ought to. All right, so enough of the news and enough of the PR. Okay, so what's up for the holidays? I mean, obviously we're going into the new year, right? So this is our New Year episode. Now that we're past that point, what are you looking forward to in 2023?
I'm looking forward to my family staying healthy
Yes,
because the past couple of
amen.
weeks we've had a lot of COVID, flu, colds. So
Yeah,
number one is just health and, keeping everybody happy and
amen
healthy.
to that.
But number two is just, a successful business. I had a great 2022, fantastic clients, great public affairs campaign. Really liked what I've been able to do with, broadcasting New Jersey Now. Exciting election year for, I think, New Jersey, a Republican Party. I'm interested just to see national politics where things evolve too.
Yeah.
I am not a Trump person, so I'm interested to see what's going to shape up with the presidential primary on the
Yeah, that's
Republican
going to be
side.
it's going to be a big year, I think, for a lot of
Yeah.
that. And it would be remiss for me not to mention just recently. I mean, I feel like every time I check in with you, you're added to a new board or you're winning another award. And I mean that sincerely because you are a superstar. And that's why I wanted to just chat with you for the podcast. Um, so many rising stars too in the state, in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Are you doing some mentoring? Are you identifying some other people too, to sort of bring up in the political space. I know the one I'm thinking of specifically is the political caucus. The Women's Political Caucus just recently gave you an award for being a superstar, which we all know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm on the board of Women's Political Caucus. I love it. One of the people that I really think is a rising star is Samantha D. Almeida. She's actually chairing the Republican task force of the Women's Political Caucus. She is president of the Associated Builders and Contractors of New Jersey. She's, I think if she is 30, she's just barely 30, but she's,
love it.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So that's
awesome.
Yeah, a person I love to work with, and she's got a really bright future. But yeah, and I just joined the board of the Jersey Shore Partnership, which is a fantastic organization dedicated to beach replenishment, beach preservation, since I do live by the Jersey Shore, which I know that's where you grew up. So I'm sure it's near and dear to your heart as well.
That's awesome. I love it. That's so cool. All right. So as we get to the end of our conversation, who should I have on for a future episode of the podcast for this year?
Well, see, there's so many good choices. Have you had on David Chen from the New York Times?
No, I have not.
David's great. He's a New Jersey resident, but he works for the New York Times. He's an investigative reporter. He's covered New Jersey. He's covered Bridgegate. He's right now, I think he's doing some sports Title IX investigative journalism, but I think he's going to cover some more political things in the future.
Awesome.
So he's really great. He'd be a great choice.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to call you again and ask you for other recommendations. So David's your recommendation today, but there's so many.
David's my today recommendation, but I am sure I'll have like 10 more for you next time you call.
I love that so much. Okay. So next time you're in DC, I need to see you in real life, but I'm so, so thankful for your time today, my friend.
Well, I will be in DC in March to see Bruce Springsteen.
I'm going to be
I have tickets.
Yay.
Are you? Oh, good.
Yes.
Wait,
we'll have to coordinate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, have a great Christmas and a wonderful 2023. Thank you for having me.
Friend. I love you.
All right. Great to see you.